Hello, hello, you beautiful souls. I wanted to get on here and chat with you all because the conversation about reaction versus responding seemed like a beautiful one to continue. And I'm moving my crystals because I had them over here. I was working with, don't want to knock them over. Um, but it seemed like a beautiful conversation to continue. And how often do you find yourself in a position where you get to choose to either react or respond to something? A lot of times we don't even realize that we have the choice. Do you realize that you have the choice? A lot of times when we're put into positions where, something is calling for our 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 attention, if we haven't shifted our awareness enough, or if we haven't balanced our nervous system enough. I love this one so much. A lot of times we can automatically, just like our automatic thoughts that you hear me talk about so much, we can automatically shift into a behavior, shift into a response, right? Whether it is an automatic thought, an automatic response, an automatic behavior, what is yours? And without judgment, go into this conversation, right? Like, what is your automatic behavior, automatic nervous system response, automatic thing, right? Sometimes there's a pattern to notice. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes it's just the day, depending on what the day is. Sometimes, like yesterday, you guys know the post I shared today, I shared the reflection about yesterday and, just honoring the power of choice and how I had so much going on yesterday with my daughter, with the chaos of the wildflowers being mowed down in my yard and my daughter being distraught because it was her wildflower corner, and her not feeling well and coming home early and trying to get her appointment scheduled and setting the appointments, and the scheduler being kind of rude and resetting the tone of the appointment on the phone with the scheduler, which even those interactions, when you engage with another person and they don't necessarily always realize their demeanor and their tone is unkind or unwelcoming, when you are already carrying so much, um, the strength and the power to not be sucked into their world is a power, right? It's a choice. And it was a choice that I made. So when I called and I immediately recognized, oh, this lady is not very friendly, she's not very nice, and she's being kind of rude, I paused the whole conversation. I stopped her. She was asking me for more information and she was being very rude. And I just paused and I was like, I'm going to pause this for a second. How are you? Are you doing okay? I'm gonna reset this phone conversation so that this phone conversation can be pleasant for both of us, because right now it's not very pleasant. It's not very kind. I don't know how your last phone call went. That's none of my business, but it doesn't seem like it went very well because this is not a very pleasant interaction, and I want this to be pleasant for both of us. So let's just go ahead and reset all of this, right? And after I did like a little reset, she explained, she was like, my computer is just acting glitchy, and she did her little disclaimer and whatever. We both reset. I got Michaela's appointment scheduled, and then I hung up with her, and then I finished managing what I needed to manage, right? So after that, then I had to call the mowing company because they mowed down Michaela's wildflowers, and I talked to that gentleman who was helpful, and he was like, you know, um, very helpful, very friendly. He was like, "Oh, I understand if you're upset." And I was very calm with him, how I'm talking to you right now. And he's like, "I commend you on how you're handling this and all of the things." And I was like, "Well, I am frustrated, but I understand that you also, you can't put my flowers back. You can't fix it, right? You're not the one who did it and you can't fix it. So it's just about finding solutions. And then, I have to do my part as a mom to help my daughter." So There's only so much that we can do through the phone. Um, and then he ended up calling back, and I missed it because I was fixing dinner yesterday. And he was sharing how the manager wanted to come out and look at the yard. And then he also had mentioned how he meditates, and that whatever it is that I do, he wanted to commend me on, or however he articulated it. It was really nice though. But he was like, I commend you on whatever practice you have or whatever practice you use, just because of how you handled the whole situation yesterday and all of that. So having someone recognize that after having a whole day where I had a lot of people yelling and fussing at me yesterday and just kind of like things going kind of wonky, I also appreciated that. So while I redirected a couple people yesterday to kind of help things, there are also people out there kind of sharing light too, right? So the more we choose to respond and acknowledge, there's also other people out there choosing to respond and not react as well. And the more we do that, the more ripples that we create in the world to inspire other people to do something similar. And it makes the world an easier, softer place to show up in for other people, which I think is really a gift. Um, but that kind of segues into the point of what I want to talk about, more so too, right? Is recognizing that we do have a choice to respond with strength. We do have a choice to respond with compassion, with wisdom, or to react with frustration, to react out of without thinking, without recognizing, without anything. Just what am I feeling in this moment? What do I want to feel? What do I want next? I want instant gratification. I want instant that instant satisfying thing, whatever that is, depending on the moment, right? Sometimes that next satisfying thing is to fulfill angers, to fulfill joys, to fulfill hungers, to fulfill um, a sexual carnal desire or something like that, right? Like there's a gratification that is needed. I know for my daughter, when I brought her home, she was also frustrated because of some stuff going on in the classroom. So I showed her how, when you're also frustrated, that energy can also be used to, instead of like being frustrated with the people who are around you, right? Because your classroom's crazy, your teacher's fussing at everyone, and just like my daughter is always been an honor student, straight A's, and just like really good. And I've always wanted her to kind of like break free of her good girl and just kind of like lash out a little bit, but I don't want to I don't want to tell her what to do in that way, but she's finding herself. She's at that age, but I wanted her to learn how to direct that energy without harming herself or harming others. So teaching her how to channel that energy. And so when she came home, I was showing her how to channel that energy into working out, right? You can channel that energy into working out without channeling that energy into yelling at other people or hurting yourself or hurting other people or saying things you don't mean. And, when she calmed down, I explained to her, there are grown-ups who, make really quick, kind of impulsive decisions, reactions that cost them their lives, and they end up in jail because they don't have the emotional intelligence to think things through. And so these are the life lessons that they don't always feel comfortable. They're kind of boring to sit through to learn, but they're really important, right? They're the life lessons that we need. And that once we learn how to feel what we're feeling, and we learn how to channel these things and become aware of these things, we can navigate them with the power that we need as the outside environment starts to do what the outside environment does. Because we can't control how the world shows up around us. We can only control ourselves as the world is showing up as itself, right? So reaction is a formed habit. right? It's a habit that we can learn to observe and change. Our responses is a choice and something that we can continue to practice. Life is practice, so it's something that we can continue to cultivate, right? And there's something that is really powerful in knowing that you have a choice, and you have a choice in what your response looks like in any situation. So practice the pause, practice the pause, practice the pause, practice the pause. Life will always try to rush you, but take a breath. Think about what you need. Think about what you need. Think about what is going on. Tell the people around you, I don't have an answer yet. If you don't have an answer yet, tell the people around you, I need to think about this because I don't have an answer yet. I understand that you want an answer, but I don't have it yet, right? If that is the truth. And then think about it, sit with it, write about it, do whatever it is that you need so that you can come up with the answer, and then get back to them. And then, follow through with it. Because sometimes the immediate answer is not the truthful answer. And I'm being reminded of when I early on in my marriage with my ex-husband, something that he would do would try to rush answers out of me out of frustration, right? When I would want to sit with things, and I would tell him, no, I'm not ready to answer that. Because then he would use that quick answer. Well, you said da 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 da. And I'd be like, yeah, I did say that, but you were rushing the answer out of me, but it wasn't my truthful answer, right? And then I would always feel misaligned. But I really had to figure out how to stand up for myself and say, I'm not going to answer that just because you're rushing me. And then I had to figure out how to say, because in the past you have used my rushed answers against me, I am not going to answer that right now, right? And really kind of shift things because of the dynamic of that relationship as well. And I'm not saying that because he was a bad person or anything like that, but because we got together when I was so young and just all of the things. And sometimes as women in American society and culture and trauma and all the things, we find ourselves in those positions and we don't know how to get ourselves out of them. And we don't understand what is happening until we're out of them, and we can look back and we can say, oh, that is what was happening. That didn't feel good. This was the cycle. This kept replaying, and c'est la vie, right? So that is why I wanted to share that as well. And, you know, I think many of us can sit and think back on experiences where we've disempowered ourselves, or we have had experiences where we have been disempowered just through manipulation or being naive or things of that nature. And, as we evolve and we go through life and we have these experiences, we continue to fill our toolbox for life with mindfulness, lived experiences, training, practice, grace, compassion, love. And all of these things can be used in how we decide to show up and how we decide to reflect on our choices, how we empower our choices. So integrity is really important for me if you haven't figured that out, and how I show up for life. And so that's why I also practice the pause, because when I do answer people, when I do show up for people, when I do anything, it's really important that justice, that things are fair, right? Things are just as they can be. I know not everything is perfect, but I try to have things be fair and just, and that things are truthful, because those things are really important to me. And So when I look at things and I'm looking at people and I'm looking at responses and I'm responding, before I choose to respond, I look at people as people and I'm responding from love, even when I'm responding from anger, which I don't respond from anger often these days. It used to be a lot when I was younger, but when I respond from anger, it's from love. When I respond from joy, from peace, from compassion or grace, it's rooted from love and from this really deep desire within myself to keep for wi- a balance inside myself. And I don't know any other way to explain it, but to keep this code within myself to just make sure that there is a, a fairness that I share with the people within my orbit, right? Um, so that I can feel like I am treating people fair and just and humane and with love and all of these things, even if it is sharing a direct communication or a firmness or a rage or um, anything, right? And boundaries and choices and all of those things are included. So I share all of that with you today. And I encourage you to look at and think about as you think about how you navigate your responses and your reactiveness today. Am I reacting or am I responding? Does this reaction or does this response leave me feeling good or does it leave me feeling not so good? And I actually responded. I'm going to read what I wrote to Miss Vicky earlier because I feel like how I wrote it maybe was a little bit better. She had written, I've been quite reactive recently, and I know it's not who I am or am supposed to be because it feels quite terrible. I feel terrible about it. Thank you for this very sweet reminder. We are all human and we all have a choice now to navigate it in a positive way through the emotions. Much love to you, Kendra. Happy Wednesday. And then my response is in part, maybe. Let the pressure for the good, bad, positive, negative go. And practice the game of responding versus reacting. It's neutral in its act, right? So the game of responding versus reacting in itself is neutral. How we feel afterwards is the only thing that is then different. But if we give ourselves that freedom and empower the choice without pressure or shame or fear, anything can happen. But a curious desire for change, it could be interesting to see what shifts or what may happen. So I wanted to share that in part just because I believe it's really important. And something that I had shared in the original post that started this conversation was how power isn't control. It's ownership of your energy, right? Power isn't control, it's ownership of your energy. And ownership of your energy is a really important practice that we all can continue to refine, especially when there's a lot of unknowns going on um, in your world in particular, whether it's with work, with business, with relationships, with parenting, with whatever. If you can allow the world to do whatever the world is going to do, and you can be rooted in your awareness of how you show up and what that looks like and what that feels like, you can bring a calm stableness and energy to what it is that you do. And that brings a trust and integrity to your work, to your relationships that people can rely on and that people can trust and that people can become familiar with, right? And I don't know, there's just something magical about it. But anyways, comment below if this resonates, if you have any thoughts, feelings, all of the things about it. I'd love to continue this conversation a little bit more. And I will talk to y'all soon. Sending you a lot of love and a lot of appreciation. Bye.